Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I thought we would go ahead and kick off my little series of reading through the Bible in a year from beginning to end. And I have finally finished Genesis and I've just started Exodus, and I thought I better film Genesis while it's still fresh on the brain. Just to recap, in case you guys missed it in a past video that I posted, one of my goals for 2024 is to read the Bible from start to finish. And I thought it would be fun to just make little progress videos, just really quick videos. I don't want them to be terribly long ones on my channel, but I'm hoping to also make a playlist on my YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to reference it in the future with just general notes and takeaways from each book of the Bible. I am not a pro. I do not have a degree in this whatsoever, but being a Christian and growing up as a pastor's kid, and especially now being in my mid-20s, I've just really wanted to read the Bible from beginning to end, and I thought that'd be a great goal for this year. Just as a reminder, I am using an ESV version of the Bible. I grew up mainly using NIV, but since becoming a young adult and attending church on my own, I have picked up an ESV version. I got this one from Barnes & Noble. But yeah, I wrote all of my takeaways on my phone, so I thought we'll just go through them together. And I might even include screenshots of it up here so that you guys can read along with me. So for the first section of notes, I really just wanted to write A, who was the book written by, and then B, a general description of what happens throughout the book. So for Genesis, it is written by Moses, and the main plot points of Genesis are A, the creation story. That happens mainly through chapters 1 through 2. This is a very well-known story in the Christian community. It's about how God created the world, and it's probably a story that I've read the most in the Bible, so I read through those chapters pretty quickly. Genesis also is very heavy on the line of descendants. It's literally throughout the entire book of Genesis. Something about the Old Testament that's really integral and important to it is the ability to see not just the history of the world and what happened before Jesus came to earth, but also the lineage of family line that led to Jesus. So although these are probably my least favorite parts to read of the Bible anytime I read the Bible, line of descendants is very important and integral to, I guess for lack of better words, just the authenticity of who Jesus is and why he came to earth. There's also many chapters devoted to Abraham's life. He is a main character of this book, attaining his multitude of offspring via Hagar versus Sarai, which then was renamed to Sarah. Some other characters, it's also about Isaac, Jacob, and Esau. Jacob and Esau are brothers, and of course Joseph, who is Jacob's son. The book of Genesis ends with Joseph's life, all about growing up, being sold into slavery, living in Egypt, and reuniting with his brothers. So that's kind of just a basic rundown on what Genesis is about. We're I want to say around 50 chapters in Genesis. Let me check real quick. Yeah, there's literally 50 chapters in Genesis, so it's a lengthy book for sure. So obviously there's going to be more within Genesis, but these are just the high key points of what I took away when I was reading the book. And then my next section of notes that I thought would be fun to include with every book's wrap up would be a didn't know / didn't realize section. So the first point that I took away that I didn't realize was that Hagar was sent away with her son after Sarah bore her son. Once Hagar, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, ran out of water, she was leaving her son to die until God intervened, asked what was wrong, and provided them with what they needed. They both went to live full lives after that. I thought that was very interesting. I feel like this is a part of Abraham and Sarah's life that doesn't really get talked about a lot, which I understand why it would be a bit of a serious topic for children to take in. The idea of Abraham trying to attain a son through the means of another woman and then sending her away. And then literally her trying to just end her and her son's life because she was just that lost and depressed on her life situation. I just thought that part of the story was really interesting. I just never really realized that about her story. And I think it's really beautiful that God intervenes and literally asked what was wrong and then provided her with what she needed. I think that's a beautiful example of how God will meet you in your lowest low. And I really liked that one. The second thing I didn't know or realize was how literal the names are in the Old Testament. I wrote some examples down just because I thought they were just so interesting to read. The name Jacob means to cheat. And that one's quite literal because the story of Jacob and Esau, Jacob cheats Esau out of his birthright. And something else that's really common in the Old Testament is naming places and altars to signify life events. And there were 2 wells that Isaac dug but caused fights among people. And I don't know how to pronounce these names, so I apologize. Esek means contention, and Sitna means enmity. This I wrote made me laugh because I love the little things in the Bible that give you like the little number annotations and then you look down at the bottom of the page and then it shows you what it means or like a different interpretation or whatever. And reading the meanings of those names and just seeing how literal it was to the situation that they were like dealing with. I felt like it was kind of humorous in a way. Like, I don't think it is intended to be humorous, but it did make me chuckle. I thought that was funny because they're like, we're going through this really tough time, and then they name a well after quite literally contention. And I think there's something beautiful about that it made me chuckle. The third thing I didn't realize was in chapter 28, verse 22, I had a question, which is, did Jacob originate tithing 10%? Because Genesis 28:22 reads, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. And obviously, growing up in a Christian household, that really stuck out to me because giving 10% of what you have specifically financially to God and the work of God in your community is a very important part of Christianity, depending on the denomination that you attend. So I thought I'd do a quick Google search and see if I was correct in that question. Like, did Jacob originate tithing? Obviously, Google is not the best resource, but that is where I'm going to for this question. And it's a little all over the place, which is understandable because everyone's going to take away different things from the Bible. It does, like, obviously, like I picked up, mention the fact that Jacob promised a tenth to God, but it also mentions that it's mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. Apparently, it's also mentioned in Proverbs 3:9. Another place that is mentioned is Leviticus 27:30, and in this Google search, it says the 10% requirement specifically comes from the Hebrew translation of tithe, which means 10. So not necessarily directly did it come from him, but I do think that's interesting that, I mean, I think that's the first place that it's mentioned that 10% was given back to God, so. And then the fourth thing that I didn't realize before rereading through Genesis was how the Bible portrays the men having emotions, especially in Genesis. The example I wrote down was Joseph weeping when he reunited with his brothers and them weeping as well. So if you know the story about Joseph, he got sold into slavery from his brothers and he put his brothers through these different challenges once he became an important figure of the land. And once he revealed his true identity to them and they realized that he was still alive and he was doing well, it brought everyone to tears. And I wrote that I feel like you don't find good examples of men showing emotions like this. And I feel like you don't, like in pop culture or in today's society, if you will, I feel like you don't see many examples of men showing like emotions in a healthy way. And I thought that was really beautiful how it was portraying their feelings towards one another. And then the next section that I wrote, which I don't know if I'll have for every book of the Bible recap that I do, but I did have a verse that brought me to tears in Genesis. And that verse is Genesis 45:28. And it says, and Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. And basically, to sum up what was happening beforehand, I wrote, Jacob found out Joseph was still alive and sent much food and money and wagons so that the whole family could move closer to Egypt and live well during the rest of the famine. And Jacob's response, which Jacob is Joseph's father, was, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. And again, I feel like it just really goes to show the beautiful emotions and connections that these men had with each other. And you see this example in other places of the Bible as well, where fathers will reunite with sons. And I feel like the moral of that is a very beautiful thing of that they don't care about all this external stuff. Like, he was more than happy just to know that his son was still alive because he was grieving the loss of his son. He thought his son was dead, and just hearing that his son was still alive was more than enough. And I love that so much. I love the moral of that. So yeah, that one brought me to tears when I reread Genesis. And then my last section that I have for Genesis is my favorite verse, which is Genesis 50 verses 19 through 21, which reads, but Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And I know it's at the end of this book in the Bible, but I just feel like it's a really good way to encapture what I feel like the book of Genesis is truly about. It talks about how we should not be afraid because we are in a place of God. And it talks a lot about sin, which was a very obviously heavy theme in the beginning of Genesis when Adam and Eve brought sin into the world by eating from the tree of good and evil, but it still wraps up with the conclusion that even though what we might mean for evil, God will still use for good. And it's just a very encouraging note to end on, I feel like, especially for the book of Genesis, because so much happens in this book. It was jam-packed with, obviously, like, again, the lineage, the history of everything, but then just lots of tea, lots of generational drama and tea. And I mean, also, we get to read about the first instances of sin against one another, and I just find it to be a very comforting note that despite that we live in a world that is full of sin, that God can still use these things to bring good to us. So yeah, that is my little wrap up of Genesis. Like I said, I'm gonna keep these wrap ups pretty short because I wanted them to be almost like kind of like Sarah's cliff notes of each book of the Bible. Also just like a little bit of encouragement to read each book of the Bible. If this is something that you've been wanting to do, I feel like it's very motivating to read it all when you come from a place of you just want understanding for yourself. And that's kind of the point of life that I'm at right now. And yeah, I just want to encourage anyone that if you're interested in it, even if you've never read the Bible before, even if you're not Christian, you just want to read the Bible, see what it's about. I know it can be a little intimidating with the size of the book, but like I said in a past video, I am using the Bible app to read it to me while I read it so that I stay focused and don't miss any important details, especially with all the history that's in the Old Testament. I feel like there's a lot that could be missed. But yeah, that was my wrap up of Genesis. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I have started Exodus. I haven't gotten that very far yet. There are 40 chapters in Exodus, so a smaller book than Genesis, but we shall see how long it takes me. But yeah, like I said, I'm hoping to make a playlist on my channel, so if you happen to see this video and then happen to not find them later on, I want to put them all in one place so that they're easy to find. And yeah, I don't know. I hope you guys enjoyed and stay tuned for when I recap Exodus. As always, I hope you guys are having a good day, but if you're not, that's okay too. I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye!